Sam Jordan has always prided himself on the freedom of country living. A third-generation livestock farmer and proud caretaker of Jordan Acres, Sam's property is more than a working farm, it's a legacy. From sunrise till sunset, he tends to his prize animals, organic crops, and the storied barn that has sheltered family celebrations for decades. The open fields, dotted with grazing cattle, lively chickens, and even a few mischievous goats, are the heart of his heritage. For Sam, every element of his homestead tells a story of perseverance and independence. The farm is not just his livelihood, but a sanctuary where nature and tradition meet modern sustainable practices. He's invested in renewable energy and eco-friendly techniques, and his animals are raised with care and respect. Yet his idyllic way of life is about to be disrupted by the overzealous enforcement of a neighboring suburban HOA. At the helm of that HOA is Kerren, a self-appointed enforcer of conformity who prides herself on upholding a rigid set of community standards. With her pristine suit, perfectly styled hair, and a clipboard always at the ready, Kerren has earned a reputation for inspecting everything from lawn ornaments to building facades. To her, the charm of a working farm is anathema to the orderly image she envisions for the neighborhood. One crisp morning, while Sam was checking on his prized dairy cows and preparing feed, he noticed an unusual commotion at the edge of his property. A small group of individuals, led by none other than Kerren herself, was strutting along the fence line toward the barnyard. Their purpose? To inspect his farm animals, as Kerren claimed, to ensure they met the aesthetic standards of the community. To Sam, this intrusion was both absurd and infuriating. "Excuse me," Sam called out as he strode toward the group, wiping his hands on his overalls. "What do you think you're doing on my property?" Kerren stepped forward, her tone crisp and condescending. "Sam, it appears your animals are not maintained according to the HOA guidelines. We're here to ensure that every resident contributes to the community's visual harmony. Your cows, your chickens, they're out of line." Sam's jaw tightened. "My farm animals are my livelihood, my family's legacy, and they're not meant to be inspected by you or your cronies. This is my property, and I manage it as I see fit." Kerren's eyes flashed with entitlement as she replied, "Rules apply to everyone, Sam. If you won't conform to the community standards, then you must expect consequences." With that, she turned on her heel and marched away, leaving Sam fuming among his animals. As the day wore on and the sun dipped toward the horizon, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The intrusion into his farm was more than a mere misunderstanding. It was the first salvo in a battle between his right to operate his farm freely and an HOA determined to enforce conformity by any means necessary. Sam resolved then and there that he would defend his property and legacy, no matter what Kerren or her cronies threw his way. And somewhere deep in the barnyard, a guard goose, a fiercely protective creature that had long been Sam's unofficial sentinel, ruffled its feathers, ready for what was coming next. The very next morning, Sam awoke to a startling sight, an official notice taped to his farmhouse door. The document, embossed with the HOA's crest and signed by Kerren herself, accused him of violating community standards by allowing his animals to roam freely and maintain their natural charm. The notice demanded that he immediately rein in his livestock or face a fine of $750. Its cold, legalistic tone was unmistakable, a warning that the HOA was mobilizing its full bureaucratic muscle. Sam's pulse quickened as he read the letter. He had always run his farm in accordance with local laws and long-standing traditions. His animals were raised organically, free to roam the pastures as nature intended. With a deep sigh, Sam retrieved his binder of county regulations and property rights documents, proof that his practices were entirely legal. Confident in his rights, he began drafting a formal response disputing the fine, citing every relevant ordinance. By mid-morning, as mist still clung to the fields, a sedan pulled up along the gravel driveway. Two uniformed inspectors emerged, clipboards in hand, and proceeded to inspect the perimeter of his property. "Mr. Jordan," one said flatly, "we're here on behalf of the HOA to verify that your property complies with our community standards." Sam met them at the door, his voice steady but laced with irritation. "My farm has always operated within the bounds of the law. I grow my animals naturally and manage my property as I see fit." Despite his explanation and the copies of zoning regulations he provided, the inspectors diligently recorded measurements and took notes, bound by Kerren's strict orders. Shortly thereafter, Kerren herself arrived on the scene, dressed in her signature crisp suit and exuding an air of uncompromising authority. She surveyed Sam's farm with a look of disdain. "Sam, these rules are not suggestions, they are mandates. If you do not comply by restricting your animals' roaming habits, you will face further penalties," she stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Her words stung, but Sam remained resolute. That afternoon, as he sat in his office, poring over legal texts and preparing his formal complaint, the weight of the HOA's intrusion pressed heavily on him. It was clear that Kerren's crusade was not just about maintaining aesthetics. It was an assault on his autonomy and the very essence of his rural way of life. Determined to fight back, Sam vowed that he would document every action taken against him and gather the evidence needed to expose this overreach once and for all. In the days that followed, Kerren's tactics became increasingly aggressive. What started with a single notice soon escalated into a full-blown campaign against Sam's way of life. Every morning, as Sam roamed his fields and barnyards, he discovered new signs of interference, a sticker here, a stenciled warning there, each one accusing him of additional violations such as animal mismanagement and unsanctioned roaming. The language was legalistic and harsh, designed not to correct but to intimidate. Rumors began to circulate among the neighbors that Kerren was systematically targeting anyone who refused to conform. One longtime resident confided to Sam that she, too, had received fines for having her pet goats roam freely, even though they were well cared for. Another neighbor revealed that a board member had discreetly mentioned how fines mysteriously disappeared from the HOA's accounts when donations were made, implying that Kerren was using the board's power to funnel money for her own purposes. Alarmed by the creeping tyranny, Sam decided to document every instance of harassment. He installed hidden cameras along the fence line and near the barn, capturing footage of inspectors arriving unannounced and issuing stern warnings. In one particularly damning clip, an inspector was seen measuring the distance between a roaming cow and a decorative fence, scribbling notes that seemed more like personal grudges than objective assessments. Sam compiled every photograph, every video, and every overheard snippet into a comprehensive dossier. When the next HOA board meeting was announced, the atmosphere in the community was electric. Homeowners, many of whom had also been victimized by Kerren's overzealous enforcement, began to rally behind Sam. At the packed meeting, with residents clutching printed copies of his evidence, Sam took the stage. With calm determination, he recounted every instance of arbitrary fines and invasive inspections, from the unauthorized animal inspections to the repeated warnings for letting his livestock roam naturally. His presentation was methodical and powerful, each piece of evidence a nail in the coffin of Kerren's unchallenged authority. Murmurs of agreement and expressions of outrage spread through the crowd as board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. What had started as a personal conflict was now evolving into a broader fight for the community's right to live freely, without arbitrary interference from a tyrannical enforcer. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that the community was no longer willing to accept Kerren's heavy-handed rule. The seeds of rebellion had been sown, and Sam's dossier was the spark that would soon ignite a full-scale revolt against arbitrary HOA overreach. One brisk morning, as Sam was tending to his animals, he noticed an unusual disturbance near the barnyard. A group of HOA inspectors, led by Kerren herself, were inspecting his farm animals, seemingly scrutinizing every moo, cluck, and bleat as if his livestock were exhibits in a show. Kerren, clipboard in hand, marched along the row of cows, commenting on how disorderly they were and demanding immediate corrective measures. Fed up with the constant interference, Sam decided it was time for a counterattack. In his barn, he had recently upgraded his automated sprinkler system, a state-of-the-art setup designed to conserve water and maintain his fields. An idea sparked in his mind. Why not turn this system into a tool of resistance? With a determined smile, Sam retreated to his control panel and adjusted the settings. At the exact moment when Kerren and her entourage reached the center of the barnyard, Sam activated the sprinklers. Instantly, a barrage of water jets erupted across the field, drenching the inspectors in a deluge of cool, refreshing water. Kerren's meticulously arranged notes and clipboard were soaked within seconds as she tried vainly to shield herself. The effect was instantaneous. Laughter erupted among the assembled neighbors who had gathered at a safe distance, and even some of the inspectors couldn't help but break into smiles despite their professional demeanor. The sight of Kerren dripping and sputtering as she attempted to regain her composure was nothing short of comical. The automated sprinklers had turned the orderly barnyard into a scene of playful chaos, a resounding message that Sam's property would not be subdued by arbitrary rules. As the water subsided and the field slowly returned to normal, Kerren's face burned with humiliation. Her attempt to enforce conformity had been met with an ingenious, light-hearted counterattack. Sam's action was a clear declaration that his way of life, where animals roamed free and nature was celebrated, would not be compromised by bureaucratic overreach. The image of a soaked, flustered Kerren spread quickly through the community and on social media, symbolizing the beginning of a broader rebellion against the HOA's tyranny. Sam's sprinkler strike had not only disrupted the invasive inspection, but had united the residents in their determination to stand up for their rights. The battle for individual freedom on the farm had entered a new, irreverent phase. Desperate to salvage her dwindling authority, Kerren refused to back down. That evening, seething from the sprinkler debacle and the public humiliation it wrought, she decided to escalate her tactics one final time. In a bid to leverage legal power against Sam, Kerren picked up the phone and called the local police, claiming that his unruly farm was causing a public disturbance, and that his animal inspection activities were a threat to community order. Within minutes, a police car arrived at Wilderfields. The officers tasked with investigating Kerren's complaint were greeted by a calm Sam standing near his barn, surrounded by his peacefully grazing animals. With a steady voice, Sam provided the officers with copies of permits, zoning documents, and records proving that his farming practices were entirely legal and compliant. As the officers examined the situation, one even remarked on the efficiency of Sam's sprinkler system, which had recently been activated in a moment of well-timed defiance. But Kerren wasn't done. In a last-ditch attempt to undermine Sam, she secretly hired a private investigator to gather evidence of mismanagement on his property. That night, while the community slept, the PI was caught on one of Sam's hidden cameras sneaking through the animal pens. The footage, time-stamped and unambiguous, showed the investigator triggering alarms and trespassing, a direct violation of Sam's property rights. At the next HOA meeting, with the entire neighborhood in attendance, Sam took to the podium and played the incriminating footage. "This," he said steadily, "is proof that Kerren's desperation has driven her to break the law in a bid to control our community. Instead of safeguarding our standards, she's been invading our privacy and misusing her authority." The room fell silent as gasps and murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Kerren attempted to defend herself with feeble excuses about protecting community order, but the overwhelming evidence left no room for dispute. In a dramatic twist, the police later issued Kerren a trespassing citation, a final blow that underscored her complete loss of credibility. By the end of the meeting, it was evident that Kerren's final, desperate move had backfired beyond repair. The community's support for Sam and the values of independent, sustainable living had never been stronger. Her days as the HOA's enforcer were numbered. In the wake of Kerren's public humiliation and her disastrous final move, the residents of Wilderfields rallied like never before. A hastily convened emergency town hall meeting was held at the local community center, a drab, fluorescent-lit room that, on that day, became the stage for a revolution against arbitrary rule. Frustrated homeowners gathered, armed with Sam's comprehensive dossier of evidence, photographs, video footage, and written testimonies detailing every instance of Kerren's overreach. One by one, residents recounted how they had been bullied by Kerren's arbitrary fines and invasive inspections. The collective anger in the room was palpable, a resounding chorus that no longer tolerated the imposition of outdated, bureaucratic rules on a living, breathing community. After hours of impassioned debate, the final vote was taken. In a historic, unanimous decision, the community voted to dissolve the current HOA board and remove Kerren from her position as president. The decision was swift and decisive, a clear declaration that tyranny would no longer be allowed to dictate their lives. Local media quickly picked up the story, heralding it as the fall of the HOA tyrant, while city officials launched an independent investigation into the board's financial practices. It emerged that funds had been misappropriated to support Kerren's personal vendetta, and countless fines had been levied solely to intimidate nonconformists. The legal fallout was swift, with heavy fines imposed on former board members, and some facing criminal charges for fraud and mismanagement. For Sam, the collapse of the HOA was both a personal vindication and a communal triumph. Sitting on his porch one crisp morning, he watched the sunrise over wilder fields with quiet satisfaction as his newly reformed community embraced a future of transparency and mutual respect. His farm, once under siege by oppressive rules, was now a beacon of independent spirit and resilience. Across the neighborhood, the oppressive shadow of the old HOA faded away, replaced by a vibrant atmosphere of unity and self-determination. Neighbors now openly discussed plans for new, democratic governance that celebrated individuality and sustainable practices. Kerren's era of heavy-handed control was over, and the community eagerly looked forward to a future free of arbitrary rules. In the aftermath of the decisive vote, the full weight of the law was brought to bear on the corrupt HOA board. City inspectors and independent auditors began a meticulous review of the board's financial records, uncovering a labyrinth of misappropriated funds and baseless fines designed solely to intimidate homeowners. The evidence was damning. Funds meant for community improvements had been siphoned off to bolster Kerren's personal agenda, and the enforcement of arbitrary rules was a blatant abuse of power. Armed with this overwhelming evidence, a coalition of aggrieved residents, led by Sam, filed a class action lawsuit against the former board. In a series of public hearings, Sam presented his comprehensive dossier, which included video recordings of invasive inspections, photographs of absurd violation notices, and internal communications that revealed the board's misconduct. The courtroom became a stage for the community's collective voice. The judge's verdict was swift and uncompromising. The board was fined heavily, and several individuals faced criminal charges for fraud and mismanagement. The settlement mandated that all misappropriated funds be redirected toward community development projects, and a new, democratically elected board was to be established to ensure transparent governance in the future. Headlines soon splashed fall of the HOA tyrants, and the case became a beacon of hope for communities battling arbitrary authority. For Sam and his neighbors, the legal victory was not merely about financial restitution. It was a powerful reclaiming of their autonomy. The courtroom drama had transformed their struggle into a resounding declaration that no one, however entrenched, was above the law. With the legal verdict and public humiliation now in full force, Kerren's personal world began to collapse. Once the iron-fisted enforcer of the HOA, she was now exposed as an overreaching bully whose actions had brought shame upon herself. Forced to resign from her position, Kerren was swiftly abandoned by former allies and board members who no longer wished to be associated with her tyrannical legacy. Her stately home, once a symbol of suburban status, was soon put on the market amid rumors of financial ruin, and whispers circulated that her longtime partner had finally left, unable to bear the burden of her relentless ambition. Attempts to secure a new role in property management were met with derision. At local job fairs, potential employers exchanged skeptical glances when her name was mentioned. In one particularly humiliating incident at a city hall meeting, Kerren tried desperately to justify her actions as necessary measures for community order. Instead, her feeble explanations were met with laughter and pointed remarks from residents, cementing her status as a cautionary tale of power abused. For Sam, witnessing Kerren's downfall was a quiet vindication. There was no triumphant gloating, only a measured satisfaction that justice had prevailed. Every misstep, every financial setback, and every whispered comment about her disreputable behavior reinforced the truth that no one is above accountability. Kerren's personal ruin became a lasting symbol of poetic justice, a reminder that tyranny eventually crumbles under the united spirit of a community determined to live free. As summer gave way to a gentle autumn, the community of Wilder Fields embraced a new era of freedom and unity. The dark days of arbitrary fines, invasive inspections, and overbearing control were now nothing more than a cautionary chapter in local lore. Sam sat on his porch, the golden light of sunset reflecting off the fence, and the distant sounds of happy animals filling the air, a peaceful counterpoint to the turmoil of the past. At a celebratory block party held in the community park, neighbors gathered to toast their victory over bureaucratic tyranny. Laughter echoed as residents shared stories of the absurdities they had endured. In one particularly memorable moment, a longtime friend produced a comically oversized HOA violation notice, accusing Sam of excessive animal inspections and unauthorized guard Goose escapades. With a wry smile, Sam accepted the playful jab and quipped, "I guess they really did try." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause, a final, resounding mic drop on the era of oppression. As twilight deepened and the party wound down, families and friends lingered, discussing plans for a future defined by democratic governance and mutual respect. The oppressive rules that once loomed over Wilder Fields had been replaced by a system that celebrated individuality and community spirit. Sitting quietly on his porch, Sam reflected on the journey. His guard Goose, a vigilant, proud creature that had chased off an overzealous Kerren during one of her ill-fated inspections, was now a beloved symbol of the farm's defiant spirit. The legacy of HOA Kerren's tyranny had been consigned to cautionary tales, and the united will of the community had ensured that freedom would always prevail. Fade to black.